There's going to be one slight change with the schedule. So this session will run until about 10:15, and then we're going to have a break with exhibitors from 10:15 to 10:45. We'll have some quick announcements right after this session's over. Gladys has a few about doing some raffles, so we'll get you guys up to speed with that. And then with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jim and then move right along. Oh, just real quick. This session is sponsored by PSM Square, Burns McDonnell, and Alaska Airlines. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. So if we get done early, we're happy to have other questions from the previous presentation. Because we really want to, in our presentation, we want a very interactive QA and get the audience participation. Okay, I've got two. Make sure the slides are good here. Okay. I just gave one. Should just be one. Let's see how it goes. We can wing it. So, Jim Lauer, I'm with DPR Construction, a project executive that I co-lead our aviation group. First-time moderator. But 15 years of doing a lot of developments inside of airports, TIs, small, big projects, et cetera. So very happy to be here. So starting with introductions. First, sorry, a little nervous here. So Dean Schultz. Dean is with the Reno Airport Authority. And then we have Mike Schmeichel with the Tucson Airport Authority, and then Judy Ross in San Jose. So tremendous careers and history in the aviation industry and within their airports. All their bios you might have read. If you haven't, please do so. So just a little bit about the topic. Besides the obvious role that airports have flying jets safely in and out, development is a huge business and can get very political, can get very ugly at times. It's a great thing within airports, but it's big business. So having processes and procedures that work really well for clear guidelines for all of us that work inside of airports is hugely important. So fair and transparent, that's really the key role, I think, of airports. As there's so much business from the RFP process, the design guidelines, make sure the lease spaces are available, whether it's in properties outside the airport, for hangars, for inside developments, make sure all the utilities are to the spaces like they need to be, the construction process, stakeholder communication. We're going to focus a little bit on concessions and retail, but this includes FBOs, hangar spaces, P3s, airlines, et cetera. So first, I'd like to start with Dean and his presentation.
Good morning, everyone. First-time speaker, too, so please be gentle on me. Jim, you've been doing a really good job on the moderating, so appreciate that. No, I mean, seriously, we've had several conversations, and interestingly enough, as part of those conversations, I've learned a couple of things. One is that all three of us actually have processes that we use for our RFPs and our tenant improvements, and so lesson one is if you don't have a documented process, get one, whether you create it yourself or you steal one of ours. I'm happy to share, and I know they are as well. So have a process. As Jim said, transparency helps significantly. Documentation helps significantly. The second observation through our conversations that I learned was that our processes have a lot of similarities, but they also have differences. So don't just rely on one, learn from others. So collect our documents from all three of us and steal the best from each of them and make your own version, but take all the good from all of ours and make your own. So I'm going to real quickly just go through our RFP process and our TI process, and I think Mike and Judy are going to do the same thing, and then we're going to open it up for questions because there's a lot of nuances in a development project and a tenant improvement in that, every project is a little unique. So, starting with the RFP process, we've recently done 2. Last year, we did a concession request for proposals. We had 4 spaces within our terminal facilities that we put out to bid. And this, at the moment, I didn't clear this with my lawyers. Judy obviously did. She can't talk about the one she has on the street. And I will mention we have it. I won't go into detail, but we also have one that's currently got 5 parcels of land on the east side of our airfield that is designated for general aviation development. That's actually on the street at the moment, and so we're looking for proposers to do that. But some of this is obvious. You want to advertise it as widely as you possibly can. Don't just rely on the airport website or the newsletter. Get out there and make sure that everybody's aware of it. And it will, we have NGEM, so if there's a web-based portal that vendors can use and get automatically notifications. That's what NGEM does. People sign up, and anytime something that comes out that's in their lane, it will automatically notify them and share that information with them. So it's a good venue if you can get access to something like that. But trade publications. Obviously, you want to tailor them to the RFP. If you're looking for FBO and general aviation services, you don't want to put it in the airport revenue news. You want to put it in AOPA. You want to put it in Flying Magazine if you can, NBAA. Try to get it out in as many venues as that's going to hit people that you think might be interested. The concessions agreement, obviously, you put it in airport revenue news and publications like that. We almost always require a mandatory pre-proposal meeting and site tour. And the reason we do that is because we want to know that the people are serious about proposals. We don't want them to just put something in that's wasting their time, wasting our time. We want them to know that we're serious about it. We want to be able to give them information and share information so their proposals are good. These 2 RFP processes, the pre-proposal meeting was mandatory, and we also hosted a site tour so that they could get hands-on or eyes-on exposure to the facilities or the properties that they were going to be proposing on. Written questions and RFP addendums. I guarantee you're going to get one-off people shooting you an email going, hey, I was just curious about what this is, or, could you just let me have a little more information on this? Don't fall into the trap of telling one person something and not sharing that with all the proposers or the potential proposers, because that will kill you in the end, that you may have told 2 different types of information, or you may have shared it, but with only 2, but not the other. So we are very strict about any questions that are submitted are going to be responded to everyone that's expressed an interest. And it's all part of an addendum to the RFP process that people have to acknowledge receipt of and having seen it. So lastly, the steps in our process. We typically don't ask for the full proposal in step 1. We know that's a lot of work, and therefore we don't want to make them go through that whole process if we were to get multiple bids on the same facility or parcel. So what we're really looking for at this first stage is sort of the concept and their ability to actually develop the concept. If it's a good concept that we like, we'll take that to the next level and we'll work with them further to refine it. But in the first phase, we don't want to have to sort through big, heavy, door-stopping documents and put them through all that work of producing those if we're not really going to take it that far. The next step then is they have a due diligence period. They can go hire geotechnical consultants. They can hire engineers to go behind the walls and all of that and dig in deeper, because the third phase is the actual business proposal that they're going to put forward, and that is what the final negotiations will be based on. So generally, I actually have a copy of both those proposals I referenced. Happy to share them, happy to give it away, whatever. But in general, this is the content of that. And so right out of the box, you want to make sure that you are clear on what you're looking for. But at the same time, you don't want to be too prescriptive in what you're asking for. You want to let the market be a little creative and tell you what they think is going to work. So you want to make sure that they know the spaces that are available, but let them be creative and tell you what would be best there, and then that way it gives you more opportunities to choose from different options. General description of the community attributes. One of the things I want to emphasize is don't be shy about talking up your community and the attributes of your airport and all that, because not everybody's familiar with little old Reno. They all think they know what Reno is, but they don't necessarily know that we got Tesla and Google and Microsoft, and we got all these tech companies now. And so this is your opportunity to sell your community to these prospective vendors and bidders. Be very clear in terms of the RFP steps, the timeline, operational security restrictions, especially in the concession side of it, because you're going to be looking for a mix of national and local vendors, and some of those local vendors might bring local contractors, not necessarily familiar with operating in an airport environment, especially difficult in a post-security airport environment. So you want to make sure that they have a full understanding of what they're going to be getting into. And again, there's more details regarding the process. And then the last bullet there, sample a lease agreement. If you can have that ready at the RFP proposal time, that helps take a lot of stuff off the table in terms of negotiating, things you can't negotiate. If you're up front with them and just give them the sample lease of what the general conditions and terms are going to be, makes the negotiations easier. Slipping over into the tenant improvement process, Jim, I know, is antsy to get me off here. So Mike and Judy are going to talk more about this, but we have a process for that as well. It applies both new developments and existing tenants. We have a tenant improvement permit application, and that's primarily for existing tenants to make changes to their existing lease spaces. So it's just a starter of the conversation. What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? What's your schedule for it to get the process going? We have a project review committee, and it consists of a representative from almost every department within the airport, so that we got engineering, we got finance, we got properties, facilities, operations. We got everybody covered in that, so that we can have a full discussion of the merits of the project. And then we have an airport improvement guidelines, and it's a 70-some page document. I've got a copy of that as well if anybody wants to look at it. And it details a lot of the steps that are required. In the interest of time, I'll skip most of this, but we do periodic reviews. We make commitments to what our response to those reviews are going to be. We lay out standards in terms of the construction walls and materials, but also the general finishes of the finished product. We have customer service impact plans we want to work through. And then we got all the detailed stuff, safety plans, security plans, badging, hot works, all the permits and all that. So with that said, I know Jim would like to move along. I will hand over the clicker.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to move your stuff. I was at the Construction Management Association meeting last week giving a presentation, and there's so much stuff on the podium, and it was tall, so I had to step aside, so I was moving my papers to make sure I didn't forget anything, but I was losing the clicker every time I did that. And as Dean indicated, I can't talk about our RFP that's on the street because it's a concession, but I'm also the protest officer who they forgot to tell me they were putting me as the protest officer before they put it out on the street. So that should be fun. It reminds me of, I'm also the hearing officer for Grand Transportation appeals and hearing. So I do come up with some unique things. We had a fight in our taxi hold lot, And then one of the taxi drivers was trying to get his permit back. So, of course, he appealed his suspension. So what I did is we went through, it took 2-3 hours. He kept talking on and described what had happened. And it was a pretty significant fight, but he participated in it. So I made him go to 6 hours of anger management training. And I haven't had any appeals from the taxi industry since. Okay, moving on to the presentation. Okay, I have just a simple flow chart on how our tenant improvement process is. And I think the unique thing about, I'll just point out the unique things. We do have a two-step, the Form A and Form B. Form A is just around the schematic or the general concept of what you're going to do. A lot of times the small projects come in under tenant improvements and we approve them at the Form A level. So not everything progresses to Form B. Some of the larger projects go on to Form B, and that's basically the complete construction plans. I do want to point out that our authority having jurisdiction, we're somewhat fortunate in that the City of San Jose has a building official in the Public Works Department that handles all city projects. So we don't have to follow our typical where the private enterprise would go through planning, building, code enforcement, and it does go through our Public Works, who's able to turn projects, I think, much quicker than it would be if it went to planning, building, and code enforcement. We do have our design criteria, and this is concessions, but it's going to apply for everything. It's a new document that's going to launch tomorrow, but this is an improvement for us, and I think JD with Aviation helped us with this. We used to have 5 documents, and all 5 and somebody come in with tenant improvement had to go through all 5 of those documents, and they were not just a document, it was a manual. So what our team did is they went through, and I think they hired Aviation to help them consolidate it all into one document. So now that whole 5 manuals are now into one document, and hopefully it would be much easier and understandable for somebody that comes in with a tenant improvement to follow. And again, it tells you basically what's in there, the design concepts and goals, example renderings, MEP, technical specs, tenant improvement submittal process, and our specific requirements. Okay, best management practices, and you can read that, but one of the things that's probably the most important in this is your internal stakeholder engagement. And it's important that they know that they're involved, because facilities is going to comment on the HVAC system if there's any impact. They're going to connect to any of the electrical system. Depending, they each have, operations always has a say because they have the requirements that we keep passengers flowing. We still have security. They don't want anybody blocking their cameras with either with a mall wall or some other permanent structure. So it's really important to have an engagement process throughout your airport, and not just us commercial service airports, but I think it's throughout any airport that you have is to have a process. But then also take a look at that process periodically, because sometimes it needs to be tweaked as you gain experience. You need to really look at it and see if it's working the best for you. So don't forget to periodically tweak your process if it's going to improve for you. And that's a picture of our Trader Vic's and DPR. Oh, you moved over the other. DPR is actually the contractor. Jim Law is contractor on 5 of the host concessions that are coming in. Okay, this is one that I will spend some time on. I guess maybe a year and a half to 2 years ago, American Airlines was doing a small improvement behind the house, and it was in the area that they had built 20 some odd years ago. So they pulled the plans out of the shelf, of their own shelf, and they drew the improvements and put the path of travel on it that showed in those 20-year-old plans. It was submitted to our building official. It was approved. They did the improvement, and then the inspector came out and went to check the path of travel. The path of travel walked right into a garbage enclosure. So that kind of started our whole ADA issue. We found an alternate to get American Airlines to occupy their facility, but then it grew from there. As more these new tenant improvements were coming in, we were working through the issues were path of travel, a lot of curbside drop-off, and it was outside the box of these improvements. You know, if you're going to do a tenant improvement, you think you're going to stay in this box area, these four walls. It's not. I mean, then you have to go through, is the tenant required to improve the traffic paddle, which path of travel, I'm stumbling over my own words, or is the airport responsible? Because the tenant, you know, path of travel is outside security over the roadways to Ubers or whatever. So are they really responsible for everything? So what we agreed with our building official and Public Works, we do this study. The study came back, it was close to 2,000 items that didn't meet the current ADA requirements. And granted, our terminal opened 10 years ago. We expected a lot of issues with the older terminal, Terminal A, but Terminal B opened actually in 2010. But some of the things we found and things you need to watch is that over time, things are adjusted by in-house staff. You attach things like AEDs to the wall, which stick out further than what the ADA requirements allow. And so it was just this progression of one thing after another. And granted, the consultant was maybe a little bit conservative, but there are a specialty to have they're called CAS, but they're certified ADA consultants. So we had these 2,000 items, this new concession program coming on, and so what do? We worked with our Public Works building official and their permitting staff, and one of the benefit was there was a new Public Works director that was only in his position for like 2 months, and there's no way he was going to go to the city council, so that he has to stop all the airport concession projects, and there was other projects as well because of this ADA issue. And we didn't want to go out and say, oh, we have all these ADA issues, because we have people watching that as well. So we have the study, we have this back, our book of basically everything that we needed to do to make us ADA compliant. So working with our building official in Public Works and the Public Works director, we outlined a path forward. So in that path forward was we did make a commitment to have a second review of these ADA issues, and then commit to making the improvements that we're required to make. And we brought in Aviation again to help us sort that out. To tell you the scope of these ADA improvements, we estimate it's going to be between $6 and $8 million. So it's going to, and they're all a lot of little projects. So that's one thing to watch, and whenever you do improvements, don't forget your considerations for ADA, and when your own staff do improvements as well or attach things on the wall, make sure that you have it reviewed for ADA compliance, because we made this commitment. Now we made a commitment to spend $6 to $8 million over a 2-year period, and some of it could have been avoided. Some of it maybe we can get waived because it's not practical. For example, on the AED box, the lever it's a slider. Well, if somebody didn't have a hand, how can they open it? But then if they could open it, could they use it to help someone? So those are questions we're trying to mull over with our building official. And maybe that's not reasonable, but so it's run into a real host of issues. So what I can say is, even if your staff puts something on the wall, make sure you have an ADA check of it. Some of the challenges, and this is, okay, he's telling me it's time, so I'll go really quickly. This has been a success story for us, and regarding any type of utility shuts off, and we took it out of kind of electric shuts down. There's a method of procedures, MOPs. We use that process. So basically, we plan out all shutdowns. We include all the stakeholders, and our shutdowns of pretty much any utility at this point has been fairly successful. So what I encourage you to do, take a look at that process and make sure it's outlined and include your stakeholders whenever you're going to go through a shutdown process. And then it should move forward. Okay, and the resolutions, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Michael.
Thank you, Judy. All right. You can go like 5 minutes.
Yep. Yeah, I'll try. Well, the benefit of going third, and what Dean mentioned is, you know, we all three discovered our guidelines. While there's differences, we all had a process, and generally it followed the same process. So being third, you're going to listen to me the least amount, just so we can really open it up to questions. That's kind of our goal. TAA also has guidelines we have on the books to do. Unfortunately, we're just too busy right now, but like Judy had recently done, we recognize we actually need to combine a few different guidelines into a single document. So we do want to do that once we have some time to catch up. I'm not sure when that's going to be at this point. And again, just workflow, you know, we have a dedicated, you know, person that manages all of our tenant improvements. And you know, the one thing that you want your tenants to know is there is a process out there. We put it on our website. We tell them when they sign leases. We try to educate them about it. You know, inevitably once or twice a year somebody calls up, hey, yeah, I want to do this project. Okay, sounds good. And okay, and yeah, we have a process. We want to start tomorrow, you know, and it's like, well, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. Let's, you know, we obviously try to work with them. We do have a customer service, you know, trying to, you know, attitude of work with all those tenants as quickly as we can. Sometimes we can, you know, expedite our 2-week review time and make those things happen fairly quickly. But, you know, no matter how well you communicate, without fail, somebody's going to, hopefully they call you the day before and say, hey, we got this project we're going to start tomorrow. What do we need to do? You know, sometimes they're out there in the field starting to work, and you say, what are you guys doing out there? Oh, there's a process for that? You know, so nonetheless, you know, there is this design process. We do a review. We give them written comments. I was going to focus a few minutes on the construction side of things. One thing we do is we require a pre-construction meeting for all tenant improvements. Some of them can be pretty informal, phone calls. But again, you know, we want that pre-con before they can start work. And really there's two things for that. The first is, you know, we give them written comments typically, and again, classic, they read the top of the line that says, oh, we've approved your process. And they don't read with these conditions underneath it. So we want to walk through those things, and some of it is really just reiterating some basic security protocols or basic notify us type of thing. So we want to do that. And we find that really helps out a lot. Again, it identifies those couple issues, you know, and sometimes it's pretty basic stuff. They get it, but if they hear it one more time before the day or two before they start construction, it really helps out. The other thing, we typically provide badged escorts, and TA provides those to tenants contractors, and we charge them for it. I mean, it's a fairly nominal fee. Tucson's fortunate to have a large contingent of retirees in the area that, with a lot of them coming from airport or military background, so they understand basic airport security type of stuff. But it's a great part-time job for them. It's an on-call thing, and they provide us good eyes and ears out there for, you know, keeping an idea of the security side of things. But then they're just out there in the field. So that's one thing. Generally, it works really well, and that way the contractor, especially on these very quick projects, doesn't have to go through our badging process and whatnot. So we've found that to be very good. You know, really, just so we can get to questions, the couple other big things on, you know, construction then is the wrap up and making sure you have good final inspections, good punch list, you get your warranties and record drawings. We've recently completed a major terminal renovation, and we found out that a lot of our, you know, floor plans over time had not been very updated. So we set in a new process now that, especially in the terminal building, any tenant improvement gets logged into that master, drawing every time. So we have much better records going forward, and it gets put into a tenant inspection program then. So we regularly, again, it's not the highest priority on our, when we have a lot of things going on, but we do try to do regular tenant inspections to make sure changes haven't been made. Did you point about ADA and those? We try to check in on those so it's not 20 years before we walk into a space and figure out the emergency exit door is blocked by, storage, that sort of thing. So with that, I, had a number of challenges listed up there, but I think, really we just want to talk through, open it up for questions so that we can hear what your challenges are. Thanks.
Well, thank you, panel. A lot of great information there. We've got about 10 minutes left. We do have prepared questions, but with the 10 minutes we have, I'd love to open it up to the audience to any specifics that you have right now.
Anthony DeFrenzo with Hollywood Burbank Airport. 2 questions, quick, I think. Dean, you mentioned a 3-phase RFP process. I'm curious how many firms you like to select to go into the phase 2 due diligence. Is it your one top firm, or do you typically shortlist 2 or 3 and have all of them advance?
It depends on how, I guess, how shaky the field is. I mean, if we have something that we really like and they seem very qualified and have done it in several locations and have good financials in that, we're quite comfortable just taking one. But if they're new and are just sort of dipping their toe into this area, we might ask a couple to go further with us.
And then one other question for anyone. Our business and properties department typically negotiates the business side of the lease, and then there's a kind of shaky handoff to the engineering department to oversee final projects. I'm curious organizationally how you handle the oversight of TIs once the business side of things is finalized.
Well, TA basically does the same thing. I mean, the properties folks are always very specific. Once the lease is done, okay, go talk to the the planning and engineering side and follow that tenant improvement process. And everybody at the airport, we make sure knows that, because people just ask around who's in charge if we want to do something, and they all know this this person is that person to go to. So we make sure everybody, maintenance guys, anybody, because they're the ones out there seeing it. They're the ones that realize, hey, something's going on out here. I don't remember seeing a notice on that. So that's how we handle it.
Yeah, and I encourage everybody to work with your real estate group very closely, because they're out there negotiating things, and sometimes what they're negotiating may not work with some of your stakeholders or over their divisions and departments in your airport. We've had a couple things where things were negotiated, and when it went to another department, and they said, you can't do that because this is what we're regulatory required to do. So, like, don't put somebody else's equipment in our IDF rooms because the PCI compliance won't permit that activity to happen. So make sure that your real estate and your individuals that are responsible for tenant improvements are talking even through the negotiations, because to make sure something isn't negotiated that can't be delivered.
I would just add that if it's an RFP and there's a selection panel, we always include one person from facilities and one person from engineering on that selection panel, so that they at least have oversight and visibility of it early stages. The properties department finalizes the lease, but they know what's coming.
Next question. Anybody have anything out there?
developers or folks that would be spending a bunch of money to build a building or occupy a space might overcome, let's say if you're in the middle of a recession, they still might want to build a building during that time because of some unusual things at your airport's benefits. That took a long time to get to that question.
I'll have a short answer. Yes, it's tied to the economy. We basically, I mean, we lag a little bit, but essentially we are extremely busy now, but 5 years ago we weren't doing anything from a tenant improvement standpoint.
Yeah, I think we're very tied to the economy because if we're in a recession, there's less people that travel, and so now you're trying to spread the costs over fewer people. I had a conversation with one of my counterparts in a public works in the hydraulics division, and we were talking about this very thing, and I go, oh, I hope we don't go into a recession, and he goes, that's why I'm in sewers, it's recession-proof.
Just because I'm getting paid to speak by the words, I would echo those sentiments. And you know, we're a smaller market. I mean, a San Francisco, a Phoenix, those kind of facilities probably aren't as influenced by that. But in a smaller market, the airport is subject to market demands as well. And in fact, the RFP we did for the concessions, we actually held that for a couple of years until we actually had a strong track record of recovery, because we knew that the market, we wouldn't be successful in attracting people when we're showing negative passenger growth.
Got like 2 or 3 more minutes. Question over here.
Yeah, Ryan Feist with Terracon. You had talked about the due diligence period in advance of the tenants going into the reconstruction. From an environmental component, say asbestos and lead-based paint, how has that impacted those due diligence periods, and do you have any lessons learned on how to best convey those messages?
So yes, the core of our building was built in 1960, and then there was expansions in the late 70s. So we do have asbestos and lead-based paint, and it's mostly contained, you know, in the drywall tape and the mastic materials for the flooring and that. So it's all fine until you actually go into construction and you do something. We allow, and the reason, let me back up one step, is the due diligence doesn't take place until we actually have a preferred person or a short list of preferred bidders, because we don't want 27 people all crawling around the space and with their own engineers and that. And so that's why we wait for the due diligence until we got a smaller number of people we can handle. But we will let them do their sampling as part of the due diligence, because we want to limit the number of surprises we're going to run into. As far as treatment, unfortunately, we've had plastic pipes venting to the outdoors that have run right through the center of the area because there's just no other way to get around it, and it's got to be treated. So we let them do it during the due diligence.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that is, you know, we definitely, especially in the terminal building, same thing, built in late 50s, early 60s, and TAA has taken the position generally that we've really done a survey for asbestos, lead paint, all of those things. So we already have a pretty good log of it, and whenever a project is coming up, we generally know if it's, you know, we're gonna need to do that. And TAA has taken a policy that we generally do all the abatement for that, especially inside the terminal building. So we try to be ahead of that before projects even come aboard. Obviously, some things are buried behind walls, and you just don't know until you get into it, but that's kind of how we try to handle it.
And getting back to the question about involving your real estate, because they're the holders of the lease, we had a project, not one of Jim's, but another one that I received a service order to go do asbestos or hazardous materials survey. And so I said, I thought the space was leased, and why are we doing this? And they said, well, we talked to the tenant, and we decided that we should do a survey to see what they're getting into. And so I referred them over to the real estate group, and the real estate group even talked to our attorney, and turned out that since they had leased that space, it's their responsibility. So in that's one case you do need constant coordination with your real estate group, because there's certain things that are stated in the lease, and to make sure that your employees that are working with the different tenants do, and then the tenant probably did know what it said. They were just trying to get somebody else to do some of the work. But so it's really important to circle back with your real estate when you run into some issues too, so they can help guide and review the lease to make sure everybody's moving in the right direction.
So we're about out of time, right? So I want to thank the panel for doing a great job today and working with them and preparing this presentation. As well as thanks Bob Trimborn and Jennifer Maples for having me do this. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Brett's going to come on up and make a couple of announcements.
All right, so we're going to be heading to a break with exhibitors that I had mentioned before. It's 10:15 to 10:45 is when we'll be back in here. And the next session is engaging decision makers, and that will run from 10:45 to 11:30. And then Gladys has some announcements about the raffle and bingo.
Yeah, just really quick, one this morning, somebody early morning dropped a gift card. So if you did drop it, honor code here, you just come in and see me and I can give it back to you.